For 3 seasons, most of us have looked at Sara as one of the most dangerous people in From. She heard voices, followed horrifying instructions, and nearly became responsible for some of the town's worst tragedies. But after this latest episode, there's a terrifying possibility we can no longer ignore. Because after what happened with Sophia, the return of the voices suddenly changes everything we thought we understood about Sara's story. And honestly, the scariest part isn't even that the voices are back. It's the possibility that Yellow Suit Man may have been controlling her all along. Before we break down why this storyline feels way more important than people realize, let's quickly recap what actually happened, because there are several small moments hidden throughout this episode that could completely change the direction of the show. Sophia, who has now moved into Sara's house and even gotten her own room, is seen going through letters addressed to the dead pastor, Pastor Dunn. On the surface, it looks innocent enough. Maybe she's simply curious. Maybe she's trying to understand the life of the man she supposedly killed. But in a show like From, scenes like this are never random. The bigger question becomes, why is Sophia studying these letters so carefully? One possibility is that she's trying to make her story believable. If anyone starts asking questions about Pastor Dunn, Sophia needs details. She needs information. She needs to sound authentic. And that instantly makes the whole scene feel unsettling. Because instead of behaving like someone overwhelmed by grief or confusion, Sophia almost feels strategic, calculated, like someone quietly preparing for questions she knows are coming. But before she can continue reading, Sara walks in to check on her, and this is where things get really interesting. Sara asks Sophia something surprisingly vulnerable. She wants to know why Sophia would want to stay with her despite knowing everything she has done. And immediately, the conversation becomes weirdly layered because Sara never actually explains what she means. Is she talking about Nathan's death? Is she referring to her violent actions from season 1? Or is she talking about the attack on Elgin? The show never says. Now, normally, that ambiguity wouldn't matter much, but here it feels incredibly important, because Sophia somehow responds like she completely understands what Sara means without asking a single follow-up question. And honestly, that should raise eyebrows. Some viewers have argued that this makes sense because accidental killing of Nathan was common knowledge around town, meaning Sophia could have heard about it. That's fair, but here's the issue. Sophia hasn't exactly spent enough time bonding with people to naturally absorb all this information. She remains strangely disconnected from the community while somehow always knowing the right thing to say. And that's where this scene starts feeling less like coincidence and more like manipulation. Because notice what Sophia does next. Before Sara can completely explain herself, before she can spiral deeper into guilt or reveal more details, Sophia redirects the conversation entirely. Instead of focusing on Sara's mistakes, she focuses on Sara's kindness. She tells her how grateful she is, how kind Sara has been. And just like that, Sara softens. It's subtle, but honestly, this feels like emotional manipulation at its finest. Think about it. Sophia avoids dangerous territory, prevents herself from potentially exposing something she shouldn't, and emotionally overwhelms Sara at exactly the right moment. Suddenly, Sara goes from questioning Sophia to wanting to take care of her. She leaves to make breakfast, and then the episode gives us one of its creepiest moments. As Sara walks downstairs, Sophia quietly begins muttering something to herself, some kind of chant, some kind of whisper, and almost immediately, Sara starts spiraling. The voices are back. Now, this changes everything, because for years, fans have debated what exactly caused Sara's visions and seizures in season 1. Were the voices coming from the town itself? Were they psychological? Were they connected to the monsters? Or was Sara simply mentally unstable? But this episode quietly introduces another possibility. What if Sara was manipulated? Sophia whispers something, Sara immediately breaks down, the voices return. That does not feel accidental. And suddenly, Sara's entire season 1 storyline starts looking completely different. Because think about what the voices convinced Sara to do back then. They pushed her toward terrifying actions. They manipulated her into believing innocent people had to die in order to save everyone else. At the time, many of us blamed Sara entirely. We saw her as dangerous, unstable, someone who simply cracked under pressure. But what if that was never the full story? What if Sara wasn't chosen because she was evil? What if she was chosen because she was vulnerable? That idea honestly makes Sara one of the most tragic characters in the entire series. Imagine carrying guilt for something you were psychologically manipulated into doing. And the show quietly reinforces this tragedy during Sara's next scene inside the church. She's sitting alone, isolated again, clearly shaken by the return of the voices when Elgin unexpectedly walks in. Now, let's be honest, this interaction should feel awkward. Sara is partly responsible for why Elgin only has one eye now. Under normal circumstances, resentment would make total sense. But surprisingly, Elgin doesn't react with anger. If anything, he reacts with compassion. The awkwardness fades quickly, and Sara asks Elgin something interesting. She asks if he's still haunted by the kimono woman. At first, the question seems random, but it immediately tells us something important. Sara is scared. People usually ask questions like that when they're trying to quietly compare pain. She's indirectly asking if someone else is suffering the way she is. And eventually, she admits the truth. The voices are back. But here's where From gets weird in the most unsettling way possible. The voices aren't demanding violence. Not yet. Instead, they tell Sara to go to the diner, pour water from a pitcher into a glass, take a sip, and then pour the water back into the pitcher. That's it. No murder, no threats, just water. And honestly, that almost makes it creepier, because the task feels meaningless, which immediately raises the question, if the action itself doesn't matter, then what exactly is being tested? Simple. Obedience. That's the terrifying part. The request is intentionally harmless. Anyone could justify doing it. It's only water. What's the worst that could happen? Better safe than sorry. And that's exactly how manipulation works. You don't begin with impossible demands. You begin with small compromises, tiny irrational acts that slowly train someone to obey fear. That's why this scene feels so important, because suddenly Season 1 starts making horrifying sense. Maybe Sara didn't immediately jump to extreme actions. Maybe she was conditioned over time. Maybe the voices started small before eventually demanding bigger sacrifices. Then Sara wasn't simply dangerous, she was manipulated. And honestly, that changes the emotional core of her entire story. Meanwhile, Sophia continues acting suspiciously in ways that honestly feel impossible to ignore. Later, she's seen near the pool staring toward the tomb of the man who became trapped inside its walls after entering the bottle tree. And there's something oddly chilling about this moment. Christy and Mari seem to look at Sophia with sympathy, almost assuming she's emotionally affected by the tragedy. But if the darker theories about Sophia are true, then the scene becomes almost disturbing in hindsight. Because while everyone else sees vulnerability, Sophia may actually be hiding something much darker. And then comes another strange moment. Sophia suddenly falls into the pool and appears to break her arm. Now, maybe this really is an accident, but let's be honest for a second. The timing feels suspicious, because the injury conveniently shifts everyone's attention. Christy and Mari immediately focus on helping her, while Sara is left alone dealing with the psychological torment of the voices. Because Abraham's story is fundamentally about faith and obedience, about someone being asked to do something terrifying and trusting anyway. Sound familiar? Sara is literally being pressured into obedience by forces she barely understands. The symbolism here feels way too intentional to ignore. Eventually, Sara gives in. She performs the task. She contaminates the water. She watches it disappear down the drain. And here's the terrifying thing. We still don't know whether the water mattered at all, because maybe the ritual had some supernatural purpose. Or maybe, and this honestly feels more likely, the task itself was never important. The point was seeing whether Sara would obey. Because if fear can still control her, then she can still be used. And that might be the scariest revelation in the entire episode. The monsters outside the town kill people physically.